In the grimdark world of gothic horror, there's only one creature that can claim to truly rule the night. That creature is the ancient, powerful, and aristocratic vampire. I've always believed the vampire to be the representation of mankind's darkest desires, and to truly capture the spirit of this dark being in tonight's paint job, it's time to break out the mineral spirits, because I'm going grimdark. I haven't played around too much with the grimdark painting style before, but Halloween seemed like a good time to start. It's a method of painting that uses heavy washes and the reductive technique to create heavily weathered models. It also tends to focus less on color saturation and more on high contrast to create a really moody painting style. I started in a pretty similar manner to most of my projects. The first thing that I did was to prime the models black, and then add a zenithal highlight with a light gray. For the zenithal, I used a dark gray and then mixed progressively more white ink into it. Then I just airbrushed the model from above, focusing on the upwards facing parts of the model. After that, I base coated the model with red. I'm picking red as the base coat because almost the entire model is armor, and red for the armor just seems like the right color for a vampire. If it's good enough for Gary Oldman, it's good enough for me. I'm just doing one or two quick coats and doing my best to leave as much of that gradient that we established with the zenithal highlights as I can. Once I'm done with the airbrush, I'm blocking out all the details that I want to work on with a dark gray. This is just to establish a strong shadow color and to differentiate those details from the armor. I'm being very careful to not touch any of the red armor with my paint, and using 1 to 2 thin coats to paint each detail. Vampire skin is cold and dead, so rather than using normal skin tones, which would be bringing some yellow and pink hues in, I'm starting with a dark gray blue and then using a faded ultramarine color for the highlights. I'm trying to make the skin cold and desaturated, so to do that I'm trying to increase the brightness without also increasing the color saturation. Oof, this brush is looking pretty rough, just look at that split hair. I'm going to stop using this brush. Well, first I'm going to keep using it for way longer than I should have because I'm very lazy about stupid stuff like this. But eventually I'm going to stop using this brush and I'm going to clean it. To clean it, I'm putting some brush soap in a cup, then getting the brush completely saturated in the brush soap. Then I wash that soap off in some water and let the brush sit for a while to dry out. Then, because I didn't want to wait for them to dry, I switched to some of my other brushes for a little while. The beautiful long hair of the vampire woman is going to be white, which should be a stark contrast from the rest of the model. So I'm picking out all the individual strands that I can with a bright warm gray. I want this to be almost painfully bright, because later on we'll be dirtying everything down with washes and effects paints, and I want to be able to have some bright spots that can provide high contrast to the rest of the model. There are only a few bits left to paint before we can start using all of our washes and effects paints, so next up I'm painting the swords and metallic bits. I'm just doing a thin coat of a dark aluminum metallic paint on the swords and hilts of each vampire. For the bases, I'm trying something new. These bases are really nicely sculpted and there's a ton of texture and details to pick out on them. I'm just dry brushing with a brighter gray over the top of my dark gray from before, and then using a mix of several different contrast paints all over the bases. The colors I picked mixed together to make this interesting gray, continuing the theme of desaturated colors. There's just a hint of blue and green that you can faintly pick out. Now we get to the proper grimdark stuff. The first main product I'm going to be using is streaking grime. Now this stuff can be used for really cool things on scale models for adding really realistic streaking effects, but for our purposes it's going to be an all-over wash that we completely coat our models with. Once they've been completely coated, I'm letting them dry for about half an hour. I was curious to see if you could see anything interesting in a time lapse of the model while it dried, but it was about as interesting as, well, watching paint dry. Alright, now we're back and it's time to use that reductive technique that I mentioned earlier. We're going to be using a makeup sponge and wiping away some of the grime from the raised parts of the model. I'm going pretty aggressive with my wiping to really try to create some areas that are completely clean while still leaving a lot of grime in the recesses and the parts of the model that I'm choosing not to wipe clean. To clean some of her brightest spots even more, I'm going to add some mineral spirits to a brush and then wipe away again. This will strip even more of the streaking grime away, and the brush gives me a little more control over which spots I'm targeting my cleaning efforts on. Once I was happy with how the streaking grime effect looked, it was time to come back in with more acrylics to brighten back up some details and add some highlights. I'm changing the hilt and some details on the scabbard to a dark bronze because all of the metallics being silver just didn't look very interesting to me. The rest of the metallics are getting highlights with pure silver along the edges and any raised areas. I'm highlighting the armor as well with a bright pinkish red edge highlight. The key to edge highlighting is having a steady hand and getting the paint consistency just right. You need the paint nice and wet so it'll flow, but not so wet that it runs all over the place. The skin needs some work to be brightened back up a bit as well, so I'm coming in with some more faded ultramarine mixed with ivory to pick out the details. After those highlights have had time to dry, it's time for another all-over wash, this time with a heavily thinned black oil wash. This will darken the deepest recesses a very deep black, hopefully adding even more contrast. And while it's still wet, I'm adding one last effect paint, Dirty Down Rust, to add some rusty red color to some of the metallic bits. And as amazing as these bases are, I still found myself wanting to add a tiny bit of foliage, so I'm adding one grass tuft to each base and then dirtying it down with more streaking grime. And a nice black base rim completes the project as usual. I'm really happy with how this project turned out. I only spent a day on it and I already have some pretty quality looking paint jobs. I think that the Grimdark painting style really lends itself to this sort of speed paint approach, because using more traditional techniques like layering and glazing would have taken me a lot longer to achieve similar effects. I'm pretty excited to bring some of these techniques into my next big army project, so keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, I guess I'll just leave you with some glamour shots of the minis and the project, and say Happy Halloween!